Hello, and welcome to the Posts About Ghosts podcast. I'm your co-host, Chellemo, and with me as always is Aidy. Hi, Aidy.
Hello.
We have another fantastic episode this week, guys. This week we are talking about ghosts and war. Aidy and I found some very interesting stuff on ghost stories related to soldiers in the battlefield. Now, I'll just go ahead and say that I didn't get any of my stories on Gettysburg this time. There's a lot of famous ghost stories from Gettysburg, no doubt. And they've been told and told. So I reached out in other places for this episode to see what else I could find out there. And I think I came up with some pretty good stuff. Actually, the whole reason I wanted to do Ghosts and War is because of a story that I read when I was a kid in a book that my grandma gave to me. The story was called Battle Trapped in Time, The Women Who Heard a Battle 9 Years Late. And this was taken from the Reader's Digest Strange Stories and Amazing Facts 1975 edition. If you want to get really specific, pages 384 and 385. Now, this book contains the moment-by-moment account of two ladies claiming to have heard battle sounds in the night. Their account was later compared to actual military records and showed uncanny similarities to an actual battle fought in the area 9 years before. Just before dawn on August 19th, 1942, Canadian and British troops attacked the German-held port Dieppe. I believe that's Dieppe, yes, in Normandy. The book called this a full-scale rehearsal for D-Day. In this battle, it says the Allies learned a lot at a very large cost. Out of the 6,086 men who landed, 3,623 were either killed, wounded, or captured. I think the damages was 59% for the Allies.
Yeah, it was not very successful. The thing was, it was actually essential because, as you said, it was the rehearsal for D-Day, so they learned an awful lot. I know it sounds somewhat cold to say it, but it was better to have it then than D-Day.
Yeah. Well, nearly 9 years later, on August the 4th, 1951, two English women on vacation in France near Dieppe were awakened in the night by the sound of gunfire. This was the first sound they heard in an event that took place over the next 3 hours. Later, military records would confirm that the ladies' accounts of what happened matched the official Allied timeline of the battle 9 years before. And something else to note about this, no one else in the area where the ladies were heard anything. They have a timeline here that begins at about 4 o'clock in the morning. The women say that they heard men's cries as if above a storm. I don't know if that means they heard they were in an actual storm or what that means, but the book says they described it as if above a storm. And there were distinct sounds of gunfire and dive bombing steadily becoming louder. Now, the official Allied records say that at 3:47 a.m., Allied assault vehicles exchanged fire with German ships. Troops manning beach defenses were probably shouting at each other.
Yeah.
Then, at 4:50 a.m., the ladies say there was abrupt silence. At 4:50 a.m., by Allied account, was 0 hour for troop landings at Puys. I'm not really sure about that word. Puys, Puys. But the operation was running 17 minutes behind schedule and firing may have stopped at this point. So that matches up with what the ladies say about there was silence. Then the ladies say at 5:07, and I find that very distinctive for them to say 5:07. I'm wondering what liberties were taken here when they were matching up the timeline. But it does say that the ladies say at 5:07 a.m., waves of loud noise, mainly dive bombers, but some faint cries in the background. According to the Allied accounts, at 5:07 a.m., landing craft beached at Puys under heavy fire. Then, destroyers bombarded Dieppe with shells while aircraft attacked seafront buildings. At 5:40 a.m., the ladies say there's silence again. And according to Allied records, the naval bombardment stopped at 5:40 a.m. At 5:50 a.m., the sound of aircraft in large numbers with fainter background noises was heard by the ladies. This was the same time that Allied reinforcements arrived and encountered German aircraft. At 6 o'clock, the ladies say all noises died away for a while. Until 6:25, they heard more cries gradually becoming fainter until at 6:55 there was uninterrupted silence. The Allied records say that at 8:30 a.m. the attack ended with massive casualties for the Allies and the survivors all surrendered. So there you go.
Yeah.
What do you think they heard?
Well, I mean, on the surface of it, it sounds like they heard the sound of the battle
Yeah,
itself.
it definitely matches up. Now, I don't know back in 1951 how easily the ladies could have had access to documents that gave a timeline. It seems a little crazy for two English ladies to go to France and make up some.
I would say that soon after the war, documents would have been still sealed. I don't know. But
yeah, I don't
the
know.
specifics of the timeline like that, I wouldn't have thought that would have been public knowledge back then. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't know how they would have gotten access to official records with very specific times.
Unless they, during the war, if they'd worked in particular areas where they may have had access to it, or whether they knew somebody. But I mean, even so, there is a lot of specific timing in that.
Yeah, there is specific timing, and you would think that now the article does not say they didn't know someone or work with wartime efforts, but the thing is that would be the first thing that people would bring out once these ladies started telling this crazy story. People are going to say, "Well, your husband is a what,
Yeah.
And you would think that that would have already been debunked.
Yeah, you would. And it wouldn't be some reenactment either. So you don't reenact something like that again that soon after the war, and it would never be in the middle of the night anyway.
No, I wouldn't think
so. It wouldn't even be that.
It would be traumatic to do that in the middle of the night.
Yeah, plus the fact the sound of aircraft in large numbers, that's not going to happen either. It's very strange. Let's put it that way.
We get a lot of World War II television, but I don't think they had that going on back then. That was more like real time. They didn't watch it on classic TV, so it's nobody with their TV up too loud. No. I wouldn't think. I don't know.
And you've got how long it ran for as well. It's nearly 3 hours. I'm trying to think of the movie The Longest Day, but that was D-Day. I don't know how long that was ultimately on for. Could have been close to that, but I don't know when that was made. I thought that was made in the 60s, late 60s.
Well, I would have thought there would have been some time. I mean, it would have been too soon. I think 51 to...
They did make some films actually during the war as propaganda, and they also made some very shortly after. But again, like, who's blasting that in the middle of the night, Yeah. I'm assuming, like you say, they're in a hotel, aren't they? So...
Well, you would think if it was a television, other people would have heard it. And that was the thing that caught my attention. No one else heard anything.
Well, also, like, back then, I don't know about France, but over here, the TV shut off until 7 a.m.
That's right.
And there was no VCRs, so you didn't have any access to home movies at home, so there was no VCRs or anything like that. Then you went to the movies to watch a film, into the cinema. So, I wouldn't have even thought that.
Crazy.
Yeah, it is.
I want to experience something like that. Maybe not necessarily war, but I would love to hear a phantom sound from the past. Put it that way. Would love that. That would be so cool.
Yeah.
Well, what have you got over there?
Well, going a bit further back, and I got this from the BBC website of all places, was the Edge Hill battlefield ghosts. So, the Battle of Edge Hill in October 1642 was during the English Civil War. and it took place between an estimated 13,000 royalist forces, which were commonly referred to as cavaliers, and the similarly sized, parliamentarian force, which would have been collectively referred to as roundheads.
Right.
And this was primarily due to what they wore. The roundheads wore helmets, cavaliers wore hats, like quite flamboyant hats.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Now, so out of the approximately 26,000 soldiers who took part in the battle, about 1,000 died and 2,000 were wounded. When I was sort of typing that up, I was thinking that's not a lot in comparison to the number that was fighting. But back then, the weapons were really inaccurate. I guess they were muskets probably back then.
Right.
Shooting at somebody was not particularly effective as it would be once you had like rifles and stuff like that, which were far more accurate because they're shooting basically lead shot. So you've got that thing of, pumping the little lead ball down the barrel of the gun, and then you got to put the gunpowder in and you got to stick it down and then you line it up and shoot the thing. But I mean, they weren't particularly accurate.
I would not want to get hit by one of those.
It's interesting, and when I was visiting the US, I went to a fort. I mean, this was obviously quite over 100 years later. It was a Civil War fort. And I actually picked up one of those muskets that they used, and they weigh a ton.
Oh,
they
I
are
bet they do.
not light at all. Like I have picked up a more modern weapon, and it was like a fraction of the weight. This thing was heavy. And you just think to yourself, how on earth were you supposed... they're quite long as well. They're like, they're not particularly great for shooting with. But it doesn't surprise me that the fatalities were kind of on the lower side, just simply because the weapons weren't accurate. And I still think they were using sabers as well to attack each other. It was probably more effective, get up close and stab people. Anyway, the Battle of Edge Hill would later become one of the weirdest ghost stories in England. It is said that at Christmas 1642, some shepherds claimed to have seen ghosts in the sky above the battlefield, recreating the aforementioned battle. Now, the Warwickshire historian Simon Alnamy, it's one of those pronunciations.
We'll go with that.
Yeah. Says the shepherds who claimed to have seen the ghosts in the sky ran to the nearest town and attempted to tell the officials there what they'd seen. When they tried to explain it, they were dismissed. Understandably, they're probably thinking the shepherds have been out there, probably drinking while, laying out there in the sun. Well, it wouldn't be the sun, would it? Because it'd be Christmas. But maybe, they'd been on a bit of the Christmas brandy or something like that. Yeah, so they're probably like, whatever. But they persisted and actually convinced the officials to go with them to the site of the apparition. Now, interestingly enough, when they all arrived there, the officials did actually witness in the sky a ghostly battle taking place between the royalists and parliamentarian forces. And the news was reported to the king. And there was even a pamphlet that was published across England warning people about this apparition. So according to the historian Simon Alnamy, I think that's how you say it.
Alnamy?
Yeah.
I would say, yeah.
Yeah. The theory regarding the apparition was attributed to an issue concerning the fact that not all the soldiers who had perished in the battle had received a proper Christian burial. Both sides called a truce, so they could search the battlefield for any unburied bodies of soldiers who had died, and they found and buried the bodies, and the ghost disappeared, never to be seen again.
Interesting.
Yeah, it became an issue of, a national issue that the authorities at the time, the king's notified, a pamphlet is published, and they actually called a truce in this civil war to address the issue. And well, according to the story, that once they found and buried all of the untended to bodies, once they'd all received a proper Christian burial, as it would have been back then, the apparition, the haunting, the event actually ceased to appear and was never seen since.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
here's my question.
Hmm.
I wish there was a more detailed description of exactly what they saw, because it said they saw a battle between the royalists and the parliamentarian forces. I want to know how they knew that's who they were. Did they see them so well that they could see their outfits?
Yeah.
Was it that clear? Because that's amazing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the outfits they wore were very contrasting. Like, normally in a civil war, they're kind of similar, but they were very contrasting.
Yeah, but if they're seeing anything like that at all, that pretty much eliminates clouds. Because I'm
Well,
thinking, are
yeah.
they seeing something in the clouds? But if they're seeing things so well that they can tell the uniform colors and, the contrast, then the clouds aren't going to do that.
No, no. It was clear enough for them to be able to identify what was what. But they're seeing a battle.
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
just seeing something appearing in the sky, they're actually seeing a battle taking place in the sky.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, that is. That's very weird. Because I thought, could it be that what do they call it? That phenomenon where you see like clouds and it'll say, oh, that looks like a person's face, or that looks
Yeah,
like
yeah.
this, or that looks like that. What do they call it? Is it pareidolia? Something anyway like that.
I know what you're talking about, but
Yeah, but they were actually like, no, this was a battle. And I guess if you're looking and seeing what is very much like a spectral battle taking place, there's going to be animation, isn't there? That's not just clouds. There's going to be animation and sound as well,
yeah.
you would imagine. So yeah, and what was interesting as well is that when they left the scene to get the officials, and the officials turn up, it was still going on. Now clouds would have moved on.
And if they were doing something like drinking or doing any other kind of mind-altering chemicals, they wouldn't have been in a hurry to go get somebody to come look.
Well, no, and then the other people wouldn't have seen it. And but then again, like, let's just say if it was clouds, what would be the chances of by the time that they came there that the clouds wouldn't have distorted or moved on and changed or whatever? But no.
Yeah, they were confident enough that they went and got somebody. So
Well, they were confident enough to approach the king, who was, the target of a civil war. I mean, the king actually didn't last much much longer after that. There's a war going on, and they took the time not only to declare a truce in order to bury the bodies, but actually to publish a pamphlet which was distributed throughout the country regarding it. It's a civil war going on at the time, so there was obviously something there. Whatever it was cause enough for everyone to call time out. Very interesting.
I have all the interest. Like I said before, I would love to see it. I would love to have anything paranormal happen to me. Let's do it. My next story is about a soldier boy's ghost.
Right.
That is the actual name of the story. The Soldier Boy's Ghost. How about that?
That's great.
It says that this is a true story by Mrs. B.C. Peters of Oak Hill in Fayette County, West Virginia. The story appeared in the September-October 1932 issue of Confederate Veteran. I find that fascinating that they still had a magazine called the Confederate Veteran in 1932. I guess that was just a lifestyle that died a slow death.
What was the approximate timeline on the American Civil War?
Would it be 1860s, 1880s, something like that?
Well, I suppose, yeah. It's theoretically, you could have, I suppose, veterans.
Yeah.
They'd be really old, but yeah.
They would still have that, what do you call that? That dedication. Their heart would be in it.
Yeah.
So I found this story by Mrs. B.C. Peters it was actually posted on the emergingcivilwar.com website in an article written by M.A. Keene on October 31st, 2025.
Right.
The story begins at the end of the American Civil War with a young Confederate soldier marching home in defeat. He was only 21 years old and looked twice as old.
Yeah.
He was wearing a uniform that had belonged to his older brother who died in the war, and it was way too big for him. At this point, he had been in service for 4 years and had seen a lot of war. He was walking back to his home in the mountains. He was beaten, discouraged, wounded, wearing his dead brother's clothes. And as he's walking along, he finds this country mansion. And when he approached the house, he found the door unlocked and nobody answering when he knocked on the door. Inside, there are signs of recent life activity. There's a fire in the fireplace, fresh food in the kitchen, and the story says even a yeast dough rising on the table, but nobody is there. Then he hears footsteps coming from upstairs. Armed with his musket, he searched the whole house top to bottom. There was just no one there. But the sounds kept repeating, walking and sometimes stomping towards him before stopping about halfway. He finally has enough of this and he flees out a back window. He's like, I don't know what's going on in there, but I'm out.
Yeah.
So he runs toward this ridge where he finally collapses, but he stays there watching for any sign of a ghost coming from the house.
Yeah.
There was just nothing. He must have spent the night camping nearby because in the morning light, he was feeling foolish for being scared, and he had gotten the idea that maybe what he heard was actually a young woman hiding upstairs who was just afraid and trying to scare him away. So what do you do when a female is scared and trying to make you go away? You go back there.
Yeah.
So he goes back there to check on her. And when he gets there, there's just no one there, but there is this fresh food put out on the table, and he figures this must have been a kind gesture from the woman, and he's supposed to have it. So he packs up his food and he goes on his way. Now, in the article that I read, there's a lot more on the symbolism of what each thing is. Like the country mansion is the South, the Confederacy.
Yeah.
As an entity. And there's a lot more in that article. And there'll be links to this article in the show notes as always. But if you're interested in that particular story, there's a lot more to read there. And actually, another ghost story from the Civil War in that same article as well.
Right.
That's it for the Ghost Soldier Boy. Now, don't you think that's a little bit presumptuous to just assume that that food was for you and take it? Because maybe she was just about to eat and she's like, dang it, here comes that guy again.
Yeah, I'll go up and get ready. I'll prepare the food and go upstairs, get ready, and comes back down. And it's like, oh my God, seriously? Yeah. Well, here's my thing. Lock your door.
Please.
Lock the door if you don't want people coming in.
I would say so, yeah.
That would solve your problem right there, I think. And also would send a message. So, yeah, whatever's going on there, poor home security.
For sure.
Appears to be the cornerstone of the problems for the owner of the property. If you don't have a door lock, get a chair.
Yes.
You know?
Something.
Brace the door shut. Make it, or write a note saying, don't come in here and steal my food.
Yeah.
Do something. Yeah, not for you. I'm having a wash. I'll be down in a minute. Keep your hands off my food. Yeah.
Well, the lady clearly needed a musket of her own, I believe.
I mean, you're assuming that it wasn't just a haunted house that was providing food for returning soldiers.
Sure.
You know?
It would be better to think that than to think that he was stealing some lady's lunch every day.
Well, yeah. I mean, he didn't see anybody though, did he?
No.
He just heard sounds of what sounded like somebody running towards him and then stopping, so...
Yeah, it's a mansion. See, I don't know what they mean exactly by country mansion. But if it's truly a mansion, somebody could be moving around in there to where you would never find them looking for them.
Was he, like, malnourished? Was he starving and thirsty and perhaps being a bit hallucinatory and, you know, suffering from the trauma of battle? I mean, he's clearly been through a lot.
Yeah. His state of mind has got to be just blown away.
Yeah, that's it. I think if somebody out there was not wanting a visitor, if they weren't, block your door, put a sign out.
Problem solved.
Yeah, actually make an appearance. Load up your guns and, go all Annie Oakley on them. So it was Annie Oakley, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
So what do you got from Scotland here?
I have got from the website clan.com, the Ghosts of Culloden Battlefield. There you go.
Now, is that a confirmed name? Do we know for sure?
Culloden?
Or is that 80 pronunciation?
No, that's how you say it, Culloden.
That is, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Carry on.
What the hell? Wow. I actually
Just
know
checking.
this story from a Scottish guy that I used to work with. That's how I know how it's pronounced. He was a Scottish historian. I don't know why he was working in finance with me. But anyway, yeah, he was big into all this. In fact, he actually gave me a book about various battles in Scotland, and Culloden is in there. But this story I got off clan.com. So there. Right. It is rumoured that many battlefields in Scotland are home to spirits and souls of those that died there. One of those battlefields is that of Culloden, which is the site of one of the most infamous battles in British history. So in 1746, a battle raged there between the Jacobite forces of Charles Edward Stuart, more famously known as Bonnie Prince Charlie, and the British government forces. Now, the Jacobites were decisively defeated in just over an hour of battle. 1,500 Jacobite soldiers were killed, and to this day it remains the last battle that was fought on British soil. That was interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
Now, when they say British soil, they're obviously referring not to territories overseas, but actually mainland Britain.
Right. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Now, it's claimed that the sounds of gunfire and the clashes of swords and crying are still heard on the site of the battle to this day. These sounds are especially heard in and around the anniversary of the battle itself. Now, there's no real more details other than that. They're not actually seeing the battle like my previous story. They're just hearing the sounds of battle. Now, one of the things I was thinking, they do reenactments in this country. And with them saying heard around the anniversary of the battle, to this day, is that a reenactment? I don't know whether they do reenactments of the Battle of Culloden. I would think they would, but
I would think so. If it's the last battle fought on,
they do like Civil War reenactments. They do Roman stuff. So the only reason why I think they may not is because obviously the Jacobites were heavily defeated. But, and that was like they were rebelling against the British at the time. So whether or not you'd want to do... But then again, I don't know. But that would certainly account for if you were hearing it around the anniversary of it today. Did anyone go out there and have a look and see if there was a load of guys dressed up running at each other? Though you would think they would see it. If you're just hearing it and not seeing anything, well, that's a different thing. However, it's not just sounds that are heard. A figure of a lone Jacobite soldier has been seen wandering the battlefield clad in his tartan, saying defeated over and over. And these are not the only paranormal activities reported at Culloden either. Now, Bonnie Prince Charlie, the leader of the Jacobite rebellion, stayed in a house close to the battlefield, which is now a hotel. And it is said that the prince haunts the place wearing his full Highland dress, waiting for the battle that would have restored him to the throne, which obviously it didn't. There you go. I thought it was an interesting one.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a multi-part thing. You've got the sounds of the battle, you've got the figure of a lone defeated Jacobite soldier, and then the actual alleged ghost of Bonnie Prince Charlie himself haunting a hotel, which was at the time a house that he supposedly stayed in. Not a long story, that one, but an interesting one nevertheless.
I agree. My last one here that I have.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do it. I'm going to go cheap and easy. I'm going to go Indian burial ground. You know how it is. Everything in America is Indian burial. No, just kidding. I did find some ghost stories about the Battle of Little Bighorn that I thought was interesting, particularly stories about the stone house there on the property. What I found was in Spooky Stories of the West, the Ghost of Little Bighorn Battlefield. And this article was written by Phil Hall and posted to cowboysandindians.com on October 30th, 2024. The Battle of Little Bighorn was an attempt by the United States Army to stop the Lakota Sioux Indian attacks led by Sitting Bull, which had been occurring against settlers and miners moving into Indian Territory. The battle ended on June 26, 1876, with Colonel Mustard. Yeah, that's great.
Colonel Mustard.
I did. I
was
said
he
it.
in the library?
Yeah, he was
with
with
the
the knife.
candlestick.
Yeah, with the candlestick. Oh, okay.
Oh, that was brilliant.
Okay. All right, here we go.
You got to
The
leave
battle
that
ended-
in. You have to leave that in.
No, I can't do it.
Yo, leave it in. It's great.
The battle ended on June 26, 1876, with Colonel Custer's cavalry suffering over 270 casualties and dozens wounded. The estimated Native American casualties were estimated to be about 100. The article goes on to claim that the heart of the paranormal activity at this historic site is the property's stone house, which was built in 1894 to serve as a residence for the grounds superintendent. An interesting thing about the first superintendents, the Crow Indians in the area called them ghost herders because they believed that these guys were in charge of keeping the dead from traveling beyond the grounds. Staff working at Stonehouse have reported lights coming on by themselves, doors refusing to be opened only to easily be opened later, and even shadowy figures have been reported here. It says here that most of these stories are recordings with the witness's name withheld because nobody wanted to be associated with the reports. One of the wildest stories about Stonehouse dates back to the summer of 1986. There's a new Battlefield Ranger living in the upstairs apartment of the house who claims he sees the ghost of a soldier in his room who is missing his head and legs. Now let's think about this.
Yeah, that would be very
So
freaky.
I guess it's just a floating torso and arms.
Yeah.
That would be extremely freaky.
Could that be a shirt or a jacket on a hanger?
Yeah, there's something going on. That's crazy.
That's a very weird apparition. I tell you what,
Yeah,
though,
I would like to know more about the circumstances.
that would facilitate me leaving the property at very high speed if that was floating towards me. I'll tell you that for nothing.
Yeah, I would be the new and the old ranger
Yeah.
on that day.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't be hanging around. I'd be like, no.
Well, there was a woman who did allow her name to be used. Her name was Christine Hope, and she worked there in 1983. Miss Hope, she says that one night during the fall, she woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning and saw a man with a long handlebar mustache sitting at the table. Later, research would uncover to her a photograph of Lieutenant Benjamin H. Hodgson, who died in battle. Miss Hope was able to then confirm that this was indeed the person she saw in her room. There are many other ghost stories about this place. Found a lot of content, just can't fit it all. If you want to have a deeper dive into that, this link, as always, will be in the show notes. There's some really cool stuff about the Stone House that you can find.
Fascinating.
You got one more?
I do indeed. This was taken from warhistoryonline.com. This story is World War I, the miracle at the Battle of Mons in 1914. So World War I was the setting for some of the bloodiest battles in all of history. Life in the trenches was terrible with awful living conditions with the constant threat of death. So it's no surprise that tales of the paranormal would occur from this time period. I've myself have heard of, quite a few stories,
Right.
different times, different locations. But yeah, one of the most famous of these stories does come from the Battle of Mons in August 1914. Now, this was cited as the first major battle between the British Expeditionary Force and the German army. Now, the British were heavily outnumbered by the advancing Germans, Having held off the initial German advance, the British were forced to retreat, with heavy casualties being sustained on both sides. And shortly after the battle, a peculiar story began to circulate in Britain, telling of divine intervention on behalf of the British forces. During the retreat, it is said that a British soldier called on St. George, who is the patron saint of England, for help. Now, depending on which version of the story is told, it is said that a ghostly army of angels, armoured cavalrymen, 14th century longbowmen, or even Joan of Arc descended onto the battlefield and began sweeping through the German forces, holding them back long enough to allow the British forces to retreat to safety. Now, this story gained a considerable amount of attention back in Britain, so much so that the story ended up being printed in newspapers, and it was actually presented as a factual occurrence at the time as well. But as an interesting side note to all of that, some people may remember this from the film, but in J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, during the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, the forces of Gondor are assisted by Aragorn arriving with his rangers with the captured Corsair ships. Now, he captures those vessels with the help from a ghostly army of the dead men of Dunharrow. Now, they didn't elaborate, they embellished on this a little bit in the film. If you remember in the film, anybody that's seen it, the dead men also take to the battlefield and basically wipe out the attacking Mordor forces there. Now, what brought this to mind, because this wasn't actually included in the article, it was something that I thought after putting the information together for the article. And I do remember that Tolkien actually fought at the Battle of the Somme in World War One.
Right.
And it could be that he heard the story of this ghostly intervention at the Battle of Mons some years earlier, given the widespread coverage that this had received in England at the time. I mean, this is pure speculation, but perhaps he actually took this idea and decided to incorporate it in his story. But as I say, in the books, they don't actually arrive at the Pelennor Fields. They take the boats, the Corsair ships. They're on their way to reinforce Sauron's army at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. They take those, they destroy the Corsairs of Umbar, and Aragorn then uses those ships to attack the Mordor forces rather than come to their assistance.
Right.
Because in the book, he's got his rangers, not the army of the dead. It's the rangers that they weren't in the film. They replaced it with the army of the dead. But, I thought that's what came to my mind. So, I mean, as I say, it's pure speculative on my side of it. But it was just like, it was interesting that...
It makes a lot of sense.
Well, I mean, a lot of what he went through in World War One formed the basis of a number of things that was in the books. So, that it wasn't like he didn't reference his experiences at all. They formed the basis of a lot of things that occur in the books were things that he experienced, and also things as well. His sort of analysis, as it were, of that war many years later, looking back upon it, did contribute an awful lot to those books. And especially with relation to the battles that do take place. I mean, there's a number of battles and conflict situations in the books. So I just thought, maybe if it was such a widespread news story at the time, I would find it difficult to believe that, a man who had a lot of knowledge, historical knowledge and linguistic knowledge and all that kind of thing, wouldn't have come across it. He was obviously a very well-read person. Being involved in the conflict himself, you would think, if he didn't actually see the article himself, stories are passed around, aren't they? So
yeah,
you would think, and also like dialing into the idea that you fight with God on your side is a very big motivator for soldiers who might be wavering in their idea of what are they fighting for? Are we on the right side? That type of thing as well would be spread around. That the enemy is the forces of evil, and we're fighting on the side of God. God is on our side, and things like that would have been spread around as well for morale purposes. Like, we have to hold the line because clearly we're on the force of good, because there was divine intervention that saved the lives of these soldiers who were able to, retreat to a better position. So, yeah, it was very, very fascinating, that particular story. And yeah, that's all I've got for this one.
That's all I've got. And that's it for season 2, episode 11, Ghosts and War. We hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, please give us a like and review on your podcast platform of choice. We also release all episodes on our YouTube channel and would love to have you subscribe and give us a like over there as well. All our socials are on the website, postaboutghosts.com. You're welcome and encouraged to join us for some paranormal chat. Until next time, remember, if you hear boots in the dark, maybe you're not alone on the field. Bye, guys.
Bye.